AITA for wanting my homeless brother-in-law off my property? Okay, Reddit, I need some serious perspective here. I'm reeling, and I don't know if I'm being unreasonable. I'm Mark, 48M. My life hasn't been a fairy tale, but I've always tried to do right by the people I love. My first wife, Sarah, was my soulmate. We were high school sweethearts, built a life together, and were over the moon when we found out she was pregnant. Tragically, Sarah died from complications during childbirth. It was devastating. I was left a widower with a newborn daughter, Emily. Sarah and I had talked about what would happen if something happened to her. We'd agreed that our house, a big 6-bedroom place we'd poured our hearts into, and our vacation cabin, a 4-bedroom escape we'd built memories in, would go to Emily when she turned 19. I wanted to make sure she was secure, just like Sarah would have wanted. Those first few years were a blur. I was a single dad, grieving, and trying to keep it together for Emily. I didn't want any more kids after losing Sarah. The thought of going through that again was too much, so I got a vasectomy. When Emily was 7, I met Lisa, 42F, through a mutual friend. She was kind, funny, and seemed to genuinely care about Emily. After a couple of years of dating, we got married. Emily was 9. I was upfront with Lisa about everything, especially finances. I even told her that Emily would always be my priority and that I wasn't looking for her to replace Sarah. Lisa said she understood and just wanted to be a supportive partner. Initially, things were good. There were a few bumps. Emily was understandably protective of her space and her memories of Sarah, and Lisa, in her eagerness to connect, sometimes overstepped. But I always stepped in, reminding Lisa of our agreement and gently guiding Emily. Eventually, they settled into a comfortable, if not always warm, dynamic. Then, things started to unravel. Emily is now 18, a bright, independent young woman. I was planning a family vacation to our cabin. It's been years since we'd all gone, and I thought it would be a nice way to celebrate her upcoming 19th birthday and her inheritance. While looking at my finances to plan the trip, I noticed some odd expenses. I'm not talking about big-ticket items, but a series of smaller, consistent withdrawals that didn't make sense. I asked Emily if it was her. She said no. Which reminded me that I had once used Lisa's tablet to buy something for the house. So I confronted Lisa. At first, she was evasive, but eventually, the truth came spilling out. She'd been secretly supporting her brother, Kevin, 35M, for over a year. Kevin lost his job at a warehouse. Apparently, his laid-back attitude had finally caught up with him. His boss, who had tolerated Kevin's frequent late arrivals and general lack of effort for far too long, finally let him go. And Kevin? He hadn't bothered to look for another job. He'd just been leeching off Lisa. I've never liked Kevin. He's loud, obnoxious, and has zero respect for boundaries. He's the kind of guy who thinks belching at the dinner table is hilarious. We've only ever interacted at family gatherings at Lisa's parents' place, and those encounters were always strained. But the worst part? Lisa confessed that Kevin had been living in our vacation cabin for the past 2 months. 2 months. My sanctuary, and Sarah's special place, where Emily had learned to swim and fish, was being occupied by this freeloader. I was furious. Not just angry, but deeply betrayed. Lisa knew how much that cabin meant to me. She knew how much I valued honesty. And she had allowed her brother, a man I actively disliked, to invade my space, my memories. Why didn't you ask me? I asked, my voice shaking. Lisa started crying, saying she was ashamed, that she knew I wouldn't approve. She'd tried to get Kevin to find a job, but he kept making excuses. She felt responsible for him, she said. Responsible? He's a grown man. I told her that Kevin had to leave the cabin immediately. I wasn't going to tolerate this. Lisa begged me to reconsider, saying he had nowhere else to go. That's not my problem, I said. He's not my responsibility. He's an adult. He needs to figure it out. Lisa accused me of being heartless. She said I was putting her in an impossible position, forcing her to choose between her brother and me. I told her she had already made her choice when she decided to hide this from me. Emily overheard part of the argument. She was shocked and angry, especially about Kevin being in the cabin. She's always been protective of her mother's memory and our shared spaces. She told Lisa that she was disgusted by her actions. Now, Lisa is staying with her parents, and Kevin is still at the cabin. I've told him he has 24 hours to vacate. I've also told Lisa that I need time to think about our marriage. My friends are split. Some say I'm being too harsh, that family is family. Others say I'm justified in being angry, that Lisa violated my trust and Kevin is taking advantage of her. AITA for wanting my homeless brother-in-law off my property? Update 1, 2 weeks later. First, let me answer a few questions. Lisa and I had a mutual understanding. I didn't force her to stay with me or anything of that nature. We signed a prenup and I made it clear that she would not get anything because I had nothing. Everything was for my daughter. Lisa is not dependent on me. She got her own money and she works. Emily has always been respectful with Lisa, and from what I saw before all this happened they were close. Hope that cleared up any confusion. Now for the update. The day after Lisa left, I went to the cabin to ensure Kevin left without issues and to document everything. When I got there, Kevin was still there. He didn't pack or anything. He just sat there, sprawled on the couch, beer in hand, and told me he wasn't going anywhere. Lisa said I could stay, he slurred. I didn't even dignify that with a response. I just called the cops. Watching them haul him out, kicking and screaming about his rights, was satisfying, in a grim way. After that, I needed to process. I sat down with Emily, really listened to her. She wasn't just angry about Kevin being in the cabin, she was deeply hurt that Lisa had kept such a huge secret, that she'd allowed someone so disrespectful into our lives and into her mother's space. Seeing the pain in Emily's eyes, the way she clutched a photo of Sarah, it solidified things for me. Emily and I then went over to the cabin to pack everything that didn't belong to us and to change the locks. We bonded and I told her new things about her mom. When we got done I changed the locks and then gave Emily the key with a letter from her mother and me. Despite the situation we were in, it felt right to do it at that moment. I also reevaluated my friendships. The ones who brushed it off, who told me to forgive and forget, they didn't understand. They didn't understand the violation, the betrayal. I cut them loose. I don't have time for people who minimize my feelings, or Emily's. Then, I started digging. I went through my bank statements, my emails, everything. And what I found, it was worse than I imagined. It wasn't just a little bit like Lisa had said, and all this couldn't have been just for Kevin. There were other small and consistent expenses, all disguised as gifts or emergencies. Lisa had been systematically draining my finances, bit by bit. I felt sick. I didn't confront her. There was no point. I packed her things, every last item, and changed the locks to the house. I wasn't going to give her any chance to weasel her way back in. I wasted no time bringing both her and her brother's things to their parents' place. When I dropped off their belongings, I told her, I want a divorce. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just scoffed. You're overreacting, Mark. You'll regret this. I just turned and walked away. I was done. Done with the manipulation and disrespect. I was hurt, but also relieved. Like a weight had been lifted. It's going to be a long, messy process, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally taking back control of my life, for myself and for Emily. Update 2. After changing the locks, I hired a surveillance company to install systems at both the house and the cabin. I wasn't taking any chances. I needed to know, without a doubt, that Emily and I were safe, and that our space was secure. It brought me peace, knowing I had eyes everywhere. Next, I found a lawyer. Initially, he seemed hesitant. He probably saw me as another angry husband, another messy divorce. But when I laid out the evidence, the bank statements, the hidden expenses, the timeline of Kevin's residency in my cabin, his eyes lit up. He saw the legal angles, the potential for a clean, decisive break. So he took my case. During this time, Lisa was silent. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was unsettling. But then, through our mutual friend, the one who introduced us, I learned she was living her best life. Social media was flooded with pictures of her at bars, restaurants, even on dates with other men. It stung, I won't lie. But a part of me knew that she was just digging her own grave. My lawyer took a week to prepare the divorce papers. During that time, I went to the bank to report the fraud. The fact that Lisa was still brazenly using my card made it a slam dunk. Even though we were married, we had no joint assets. Everything I owned, the house, the cabin, my investments, was earmarked for Emily. I had kept every receipt, every statement, every transaction. I handed it all over. One thing I had been very firm about was that even though I married Lisa, there were no joint assets. Everything I owned, the house, the cabin, my investments, was earmarked for Emily. Even if I had died, Lisa would have only gotten what she brought into the marriage and the car I bought her. The bank froze my accounts and launched an investigation. I handed over every piece of evidence I'd collected that related to fraud, knowing it could be useful. Leaving the bank, I felt a weight lift. They were surprisingly cooperative, especially when I presented them with copies of evidence. I took a moment, then contacted my lawyer and told him to get the ball rolling. When Lisa received the divorce papers, things took a sharp, unexpected turn. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled. She went ballistic. The silence was replaced by a torrent of angry calls, texts, and social media posts. She accused me of being a monster, a control freak, a liar. She threatened to expose my dark secrets, whatever those were. Then she showed up at the house, screaming at me through the door. It was glorious LMAO. She left when I told her she was being recorded, but of course, the harassment didn't stop. So the video of her at my house just accidentally got leaked, you catch my drift, after the video hit social media, anonymously. Everyone who defended Lisa got silent. Lisa also got a letter from my lawyer which shut her up. The silence made all this worth it. Lisa's actions confirmed everything I'd suspected. She wasn't a victim of her brother's manipulation, she was the master manipulator herself. Update 3, 1 year later. My apologies, Reddit. Time has flown by, and I realize I left you all hanging. So, here's the condensed version of the past year. I am Lisa free. The divorce took a little while, but I made it. Lisa's legal situation was frustrating though. Despite the clear evidence of fraud, she managed to get off lightly. It was a combination of it being her first offense, some slick legal maneuvering, and a system that doesn't always prioritize financial crimes against family members. I was angry, yes, but also resigned. I'd done what I could. Justice wasn't always served, but I'd learned to accept that. Lisa is back living with her parents after losing her job and paying back the money. From what I hear through the grapevine, small towns and gossip, things aren't exactly rosy over there. Apparently, Kevin, in his infinite wisdom, invested a significant portion of their savings in a startup that turned out to be less than legitimate. Let's just say the authorities got involved, and the parents are now dealing with the fallout. They reaped what they sowed. Emily is thriving. She's moved into the cabin, which has always been her dream. She's figuring out her own path, which made me so proud. She's also working part-time for me, saving up for her first car. She insisted on it, saying she wanted to be independent. I remember the letter I gave her that day. A letter her mother wrote. I have no idea what Sarah put in that letter, but I think it resonated with her. She's become so much more self-assured, more grounded. It fills me with a quiet joy. As for me, I'm still single. The whole Lisa situation left a bitter taste. I'm not closed off to the idea of love again, but I'm in no rush. I have a close female friend, someone I enjoy spending time with. We go to concerts, have dinner, laugh. It's a comfortable, easy friendship, and that's enough for now. Looking back, it's been a tumultuous year. I've learned a lot about trust, betrayal, and the importance of setting boundaries. I've also learned that family isn't always blood, and that sometimes, the strongest bonds are the ones you forge yourself. Thank you, Reddit, for listening, for your support, and for reminding me that I wasn't alone in this. Your comments, your perspectives, they helped me navigate a very dark time. You guys are the best.